Chapter 3. Is there life on other planets? The Fermi Paradox. In 1950, Nobel Prize winner and pioneer of atomic energy Enrico Fermi, while working at Los Alamos Nuclear Facility in New Mexico, raised this straightforward question. Are we the only technologically advanced civilization in the universe? And if we are not, then where are they? Why haven't we seen any traces of extraterrestrial life, such as probes or transmissions? Modern space agencies admit that they have failed, so far, to find even the slightest sign of intelligent extraterrestrial life. National Geographic magazine pointed out in an interview with SETI's senior astronomer Seth Shostak, he and his colleagues have never found proof that anyone or anything up there is trying to make contact. This failure presents a real challenge to SETI scientists. If the universe is billions of years older than the Earth, then intelligent life would have had plenty of time to evolve elsewhere. So why aren't the airwaves filled with their communications? Shostak suggested an answer. The usual assumption is they're some sort of soft, squishy aliens like you see in the movies, just a little more advanced than we so we can find them. But the galaxy, our Milky Way, is 2 or 3 times the age of the Earth, so there are going to be some societies out there that are millions of years, maybe more, beyond ours. In other words, Shostak believes that we may be a primitive culture trying to communicate with older, more advanced civilizations, similar to a jungle tribe that bangs on drums and is listening for return messages from yuppies who communicate with mobile phones. If this is the case, then Shostak believes it should be enough to find even the merest speck of life, past or present, on other planets. He explains, if another world, such as Mars, the next world out from the Sun, is proved to have supported life, that would imply that the cosmos is drenched with living things. We could conclude that planets with life are as common as phone poles. But this suggestion doesn't satisfy Fermi's original question. Surely intelligent aliens would be curious explorers just like us. In a 15-billion-year-old universe, there should have been plenty of time for at least the very first advanced race to send starships to colonize planets. Even if the first colonizing expedition took 1 million years of travel, assuming several generations of explorers, the new colony, once established, and the original civilization could then each send out another ship to colonize other planets, doubling the number of new colonies every 1 million years. After 10 million years, there would be 1,024 alien colonies, and after 20 million years, there would be 1 million. At that rate, in 40 million years, there would be 1 trillion civilizations. After 15 billion years, the number of alien civilizations in the universe would be tripping over each other. And this overpopulation assumes only 1 race of intelligent aliens. The problem would be compounded further if 2 separate races had evolved. This lack of ETs idea has become known as the Fermi Paradox. In short, where is everybody? Even SETI enthusiasts admit that the paradox is a difficult one to ignore, because any advanced alien race would surely have developed technology in the electromagnetic spectrum to be able to communicate as effectively as humans have done, and thus we should be picking up their communications. Nonetheless, it's argued that we are dealing with the unknown, and therefore an unknown set of parameters. The universe is a big place, so one cannot say for sure. Real science we can understand. Despite the space agency's lack of success in intercepting alien communications or discovering signs of alien life, scientists and ufologists alike are keen to keep up the search. What evidence are they looking for, and how can we know when they've found it? In the following chapters, we'll carefully evaluate the evidence that ufologists have already put forward to support the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. That is, the belief that extraterrestrials have been regularly visiting the Earth. To look at the evidence fairly and objectively, it is essential first to understand the difference between claims which are scientifically testable and those which, whether true or otherwise, are not, and thus fall into the realm of beliefs held by faith. We've earlier mentioned that pre-existing beliefs are always involved when people consider evidence. That is, the facts are always interpreted within an existing worldview or framework of belief. Right at the very core of someone's belief about extraterrestrials is the controversial issue of origins. A person will frequently base his ideas about the origin of alien life on his belief about how life arose on Earth. For instance, the science fiction writers mentioned in the last chapter, some of whom are self-avowed atheists, all base their writings on their beliefs about origins. We've already discussed the subjective nature of claims in ufology that are often presented as evidence. Can we scientifically investigate the claims made by contactees and abductees who often say they received messages delivered by our space brothers? Millions of people claim to have seen UFOs or been contacted by aliens, even to the extent of being transported in spaceships with detailed descriptions of machinery. Yet we have never recovered an alien spacecraft or even found undisputed fragments of one. Nor have we captured any alien in the act of abduction. In fact, to date, and to the author's best knowledge, there has not been one single documented encounter of a human with an alien that can be appropriately verified. In an effort to explain this widespread phenomenon, John Mack, who was a world-famous alien abduction researcher and former professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, said that these claims are stretching our understanding of reality. He observed, other cultures have always known that there were other realities, other beings, other dimensions. There is a world of other dimensions, of other realities that can cross over into our own world. Is Max suggesting that so-called aliens may be visitors from another reality, dimension, or even universe? These ideas, sometimes called the interdimensional hypothesis, IDH, or the extra-dimensional hypothesis, EDH, gained notoriety as a result of the writings of ufologist Jacques Vallée, among others. We'll take a look at Jacques Vallée's research later. Whether he is correct or not, his hypothesis appears to be outside of our present scientific ability to test. Unlike interdimensional hypothesis and extra-dimensional hypothesis, we can look at the extraterrestrial hypothesis because for extraterrestrial life forms to really exist, it is fair to assume that they must have a place to live. We can at least use the scientific method to search for their homes. For example, science shows that the ability to travel at faster than light speeds within our universe is a physical impossibility. See the previous chapter. So, extraterrestrial visitors must be inhabitants of our solar system or planets of nearby star systems that would not require several lifetimes of travel time to reach the Earth. By this process, we can eliminate all that is impossible, leaving us with a list of what is possible. However, what if we cannot find any suitable hard evidence to verify that the possible is probable or perhaps real? Then the best we can do, as a last resort, is to consider which belief system best fits the circumstantial evidence. Before we proceed with our investigation of UFOs, we need to understand the limits of science. We can divide scientific procedure into two types commonly in usage today. The first is operational or process science. This is the science that everyone is familiar with. We enjoy the benefits of operational science every day. Advances in technology have given us modern medicine, electronics, aviation, and engineering. They've even put man on the moon. These discoveries are built upon principles that we can test and use in experiments, in the present. For example, you can go to the kitchen and boil water at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. Tomorrow, you can repeat the same experiment and will get the same results. With operational science, there is little room for speculation or guesswork. The other type of science is historical or origin science. This involves working out what happened in the past. Unlike operational science, historical science is severely limited because we cannot experiment on or test directly past events. We don't have a time machine, so we can't repeat or observe events in history. As we've previously mentioned, this problem is at the very core of the whole hypothesis of extraterrestrial life, which assumes that life emerged spontaneously on Earth, therefore it must have emerged spontaneously elsewhere as well. There is no testable, repeatable experiment to show, for instance, whether reptiles changed into birds or apes into humans, as claimed by evolutionists. Even if one could arrange an experiment to turn a reptile into a bird, this experiment would not prove that the same thing happened once upon a time. We do see changes in living things, which are interpreted as supporting the hypothesis of macroevolutionary change. This might be so if these were generally creative in the sense of generating new functional genetic information. The evidence to date indicates the opposite, but even then would not prove that it had happened in the past. See the next chapter. The origin of life on Earth is presumed to have occurred only once, so no living person has ever seen such a thing. In such historical or forensic science, the present-day facts, data, must be interpreted to fill in the gaps about the past. The scientist is forced to make inferences based on assumptions. The further he goes back into the past, the more he is removed from the events, and the more the methods of operational science become invalid. Speculation and pre-existing beliefs play a major role in the interpretation of data. If a scientist is already convinced that evolution is true, he will extrapolate results along that line of thinking. His views are religious because he has a belief system about the past, and vice versa for those who are already convinced that evolution is untrue, of course. Experts in historical science have astutely observed the conflicts between science and religion occur in historical science, not in operational science. Unfortunately, the respect earned by the successes of operational science confounds many into thinking that the conjectural claims arising from origin science carry the same authority. Atheistic evolutionists generally reject the notion that an outside intelligence created the universe, because this is a religious belief, not science. Instead, they invoke an initial Big Bang that had no cause. Yet many famous atheistic scientists, such as Sir Fred Hoyle and Sir Francis Crick, whose beliefs are discussed in the next chapter, have no problem with invoking intelligence, e.g., inferring aliens who supposedly created the first life on Earth. As we shall see, every view about origins, including the claim of materialists that no God was necessary, materialism is the belief that matter is all there is, falls outside of operational science. We weren't there to see or test the events. They are all clearly religious beliefs. So where does science begin? Science and beliefs. Beliefs about the past have nothing to do with the ability of scientists to do good operational science. Many of the founding fathers of operational science were, in fact, motivated by their belief that the universe was made by a rational creator. Famous names include Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton, Johannes Kepler, John Ambrose Fleming, Lord Kelvin, and Louis Pasteur. They believed that an orderly universe is the hallmark of a designer. Billions of people around the world still believe in a creation by a divine being. And amazingly, many thousands of highly qualified scientists also subscribe to this view. This fact may come as a surprise to many, but only because evolution is the prevailing belief and is presumed to be an indisputable fact. If we're considering world-shaking claims that ETs are visiting the Earth, surely we should presume nothing. Only by understanding the limits of operational science and by keeping an open mind can we properly investigate the evidence for life on other planets. The Big Bang, briefly. It's our intention in the next few chapters to examine in non-technical layman's terms the underlying philosophies of historical science, beginning with the Big Bang, the evolution of the cosmos. This theory claims to account for the creation of matter and subsequently all life forms, including any extraterrestrial ones. According to the Big Bang theory, everything came into existence by itself, out of nothing, about 15 billion years ago. Most people accept this view based on the word of scientists, but few ordinary people have ever examined the details. The story goes like this. In the beginning, there was nothing. But apparently a quantum fluctuation produced a singularity or kernel of energy that some say was no bigger than the head of a pin. And this pinhead contained the entire universe and all the matter in it, including space itself. Scientists don't know what could have triggered such an event. It remains a complete unknown. Actually, because time itself is said to have been brought into existence at the same moment, and because all the laws of science break down in such a singularity, we can't know, in principle. And of course, the alleged event can never be observed or repeated. Thus, by definition, the Big Bang origin of the universe, even if it really were to have happened that way, cannot be said to be a scientific fact, but more in the realm of belief. I recall attending a UFO conference where a seasoned investigator claimed that this was real science, which underpinned his belief about UFOs. The Big Bang had created innumerable planets elsewhere in the universe. He then explained that since the great cosmic science experiment, namely evolution, had occurred on the Earth, it must have occurred elsewhere in the universe. On the cover of a famous science journal, a summation of an aptly described article called Guth's Grand Guess by the famous cosmologist and father of the inflation model of the Big Bang, Alan Guth, stated, albeit in a tongue-in-cheek fashion, "The universe burst into something from absolutely nothing. Zero. Nada. And as it got bigger, it became filled with even more stuff that came from absolutely nowhere." As the theory goes, the universe, mainly in the form of radiation, spread outward and temperatures cooled enough for the first atoms to form. After about 5 billion years, the first stars began to form out of cooling gas clouds. Eventually, other processes gave rise to galaxies, our Milky Way and planets. Interestingly, many argue that it is implausible to invoke a creator who created matter from nothing. However, the Big Bang theory invokes a similar belief without any basis in observed reality. Either matter is eternal, which neither camp believes, or there is a supernatural aspect or intelligence which brought matter and the natural realm into existence. Both are religious beliefs. This indicates the importance of starting assumptions in any origins theory. Many cosmologists do not like to refer to the Big Bang theory as an explosion of matter, arguing that it is really an expansion of space-time and energy. Their reason is that the average person, including most non-specialist scientists, think of the entire material of the universe expanding into pre-existing space. Thus, our universe would have an edge and a center, like an expanding balloon. However, the most popular theory among the Big Bang experts is that matter and space itself are expanding together with no edge or center. The theory is a little convoluted, but try to imagine the universe and its galaxies existing only on the surface of a small balloon, i.e., the galaxies are like sequins stuck into the two-dimensional surface of the balloon. As the balloon expands in 3 dimensions, all the galaxies move away from each other in every direction in 2 dimensions. Imagine you were an ant on the surface of the balloon. No matter how far you kept traveling in any direction, you would never reach the end of this 2-dimensional universe because there is no edge, even though you might eventually end up where you started. Since there is no edge, there is no center to this 2-dimensional space either. But our normal understanding of 3 dimensions, height, length, and breadth, isn't adequate to explain the Big Bang theory. We have to shift our balloon model up a gear to include a 4th dimension called hyperspace. In effect, just as our ant's 2-dimensional 2D world was wrapped around a 3D sphere, this 3D universe of ours is, in Big Bang thinking, wrapped around a 4D hypersphere. So, just as the balloon surface had no edge or center, neither does this model of our universe. As the 3D expansion of the balloon causes a 2D moving apart of the objects on the surface, so a 4D expansion of our hypersphere causes every object to move away from every other object in 3D. This is why, Big Bangers say, all distant galaxies appear to be moving away from us. If we were out on a distant galaxy, everything would also appear to be moving away from us. If you're having trouble imagining this, don't worry. You're not alone. Experts say it's impossible to imagine. You've just got to accept it. There's a reason for detailing these complexities. Most think that the details about the origin of our universe have been worked out. But it's a non-testable and convoluted theory, and there are some prominent figures in the world of astronomy who reject it. And just accepting scientists' conjectures has enormous implications for our study. The emptiness that is supposed to be inside the balloon is known as hyperspace. This part of the theory allows science fiction writers to imagine traveling through wormholes or to conceive of folding space so that their imaginary vehicles can make shortcuts across hyperspace. But what scientific evidence has led to this idea? Because the universe gives the appearance that it is or has been stretched by expansion, the light traveling to Earth from distant galaxies has also been stretched. This causes the wavelength of the actual light to be redshifted, or its wavelengths lengthened or stretched toward the red end of the light spectrum. Conversely, if light wavelengths were contracted, shortened, they would be blue shifted. Initial observations from the Earth showed that the light from distant galaxies in every direction has been redshifted, interpreted to mean that all galaxies are moving away from the Earth. A very normal and reasonable explanation for this would be that our galaxy, the Milky Way, and thus Earth, is somewhere near the center of the universe. This would be so even if there had never been a primeval Big Bang from some single point. We'll now see one reason why we stress that philosophical assumptions underlie all origin science. The prima facie, obvious and straightforward interpretation of redshifted light is unacceptable, because it lends itself to the notion that the Earth is in a special place, i.e., it's the result of purpose or design. The famous astronomer Edwin Hubble, after whom the Hubble Space Telescope is named, admitted this. Such a condition, these redshifts, would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe analogous, in a sense, to the ancient conception of a central Earth. The hypothesis cannot be disproved, but it is unwelcome. But the unwelcome supposition of a favoured location must be avoided at all costs. Such a favoured position, of course, is intolerable. Moreover, it represents a discrepancy with the theory because the theory postulates homogeneity, smoothness, or evenness. Hubble was really saying that although the evidence suggests we are somewhere near the centre, it was an unacceptable proposition to him. George Francis Rayner Ellis is another high-profile cosmologist who has co-authored papers with Big Bang guru and science populist Stephen Hawking. In a profile in Scientific American, he honestly admitted the role of philosophical assumptions. People need to be aware that there is a range of models that could explain the observations. For instance, I can construct you a spherically symmetrical universe with Earth at its center, and you cannot disprove it based on observations. You can only exclude it on philosophical grounds. In my view, there is absolutely nothing wrong in that. What I want to bring into the open is the fact that we are using philosophical criteria, beliefs, in choosing our models. A lot of cosmology tries to hide that. The belief in cosmological evolution has spurred the belief that ETs have filled our universe. Dr. Carl Sagan, although a UFO skeptic, believed that extraterrestrial life had proliferated throughout our universe. Yet in calculating the odds that life could evolve on just one planet, he estimated it to be roughly 1 chance in 10, followed by 2 billion zeros. This number is so unimaginably large that it would fill several thousand copies of this book. In contrast, current astronomical discoveries about redshifts make sense within the cosmology of the Bible, perhaps the most widely held alternative explanation for how our universe came to be. For instance, the Old Testament of the Bible contains 17 separate verses that state in one form or another that God stretched out the heavens during the process of creation. Many cosmologists find this claim unbelievable because they consider the Bible to be just a collection of stories written by early men thousands of years ago who had no knowledge of such things. But many UFO believers think otherwise, deducing that the Bible's scientific insight must have come from an extraterrestrial source with superior knowledge of the universe. The reason that many reject the Bible's cosmology is religious, not scientific. Cosmologists who reject the Bible's viewpoint have already discounted the idea of an intelligence behind the universe, and they have invented other models in an effort to solve the problem of redshifted starlight without giving Earth a favored location or supposing an intelligent creator. Evolutionary cosmologist P.W. Atkins explains, "My aim is to argue that the universe can come into existence without intervention and that there is no need to invoke the idea of a supreme being. Our task should be clear. We have to embark upon the track of the absolute zero of intervention. The only faith we need for the journey is the belief that everything can be understood and, ultimately, there is nothing to explain." One should take notice of the language here. My aim, our task, the only faith. When it comes to origins, many scientists are intent on proving their pre-existing beliefs. Has the Big Bang's bubble burst? The fantastic and ingenious idea of the Big Bang stretching the universe on a 4D sphere is an attempt to solve the redshift problem. It provides a naturalistic interpretation for those who reject the supernatural. Unfortunately for them, there are substantial problems with the Big Bang idea. Differing models. There are various models of the Big Bang, such as the eternally oscillating model, which dispenses with the need to explain the original kernel of energy. Some models have finite universes and others have infinite universes. Obviously, not every model can be correct. The conflict between theories highlights the conjectural nature of origin science and Big Bang ideology in particular. What lit the fuse? There is no coherent explanation of how the initial primeval ball of pure energy came into existence or what caused it to expand. What caused a quantum fluctuation in nothingness? What caused the laws of physics that govern the behavior of such fluctuations in the first place? Who knows? No antimatter. Our understanding of physics requires an equal production of antimatter for all matter created in the process of converting energy to matter. Yet there is a scarcity of detectable antimatter in the universe. This is a very serious objection to the Big Bang hypothesis for which there has been no satisfactory explanation. Stars dying. Even though it's argued that there is some evidence of stars forming, it is unlikely that this is the process by which stars came into being in the first place. There is no known mechanism by which stars can form by gravity collapse from a cloud of gas unless something like an exploding star compresses the gas. It would take a star to make a star. And there is more direct evidence of stars dying outnumbering any that may be forming. The evidence overall is for a decaying universe, not an evolving one. Inadequate gravitational force to form planets. According to the accretion theory, dust particles in clouds, supposedly the remnants of exploding stars, were initially attracted to each other and eventually formed lumps and subsequently planets. Although even small particles have a minuscule gravitational attraction, it is too small to allow planets to form in the alleged time frame of the universe. The problem of uniform temperatures in background microwave radiation. Low-energy microwave radiation permeates space, only about 3 degrees Kelvin, K, which is minus 270 degrees Celsius, 3 degrees above absolute zero when all atoms effectively stop moving. This radiation is supposedly an afterglow of the energy from the Big Bang. This claim is really much ado about nothing. Whatever the temperature of deep space, the evolutionists could always say that this was an afterglow of a Big Bang. If cosmologists had discovered lower or higher temperatures, they could easily have fiddled with their startup assumptions to make the evidence fit. Such fudging has been demonstrated, and the statement that the exact temperature was predicted by Big Bang theory is factually incorrect. In reality, this background radiation is a serious problem for the Big Bang theory. The temperature is apparently even, homogeneous, all over the known universe. In the conditions predicted by the Big Bang, there is not enough time for the heat to have dissipated evenly from one side of the universe to the other, even though infrared radiation travels at light speed. Cosmologist Robert Oldershaw was quoted in New Scientist as saying, "The Big Bang model has several serious problems. When the original inflation model ran into contradictions, it was replaced by a modification called the new inflation. Some have even advocated a second inflationary period, double inflation. Let us consider some of the problems. First, the Big Bang is treated as an unexplainable event without a cause. Second, the Big Bang could not explain convincingly how matter got organized into lumps, galaxies and clusters of galaxies. And thirdly, it did not predict that for the universe to be held together in the way it is, more than 90% of the universe would have been in the form of some strange, unknown dark form of matter. It's astounding that the Big Bang hypothesis is the only cosmological model that physicists have taken seriously." He goes on to say, "The first trend is that physicists are increasingly devising mathematically elegant hypotheses which they say are compelling, but which nevertheless cannot be verified by experiments or observations. The second trend is that theorists are reluctant to give up their elegant notions, preferring to modify the theory rather than discard it even when observations don't support it. There are many hypotheses of the new physics that suffer from a lack of testable predictions. Some that come to mind are the existence of hidden dimensions, shadow matter, wormholes in space-time, and the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. We are in serious danger of ending up with elegant theories that have little or nothing to do with how the real world works. The evolutionary origin of life in the universe is supposed to have been started by the Big Bang, an event that most people, including scientists, believe just happened. It is central to the extraterrestrial hypothesis for the evolution of extraterrestrial life to have occurred on other planets. This is why we've spent considerable time on the Big Bang, demonstrating the philosophical nature of the unverifiable ideas involved. Noah's flood. On Mars? It seems that mankind has been obsessed with Mars for as long as we have had records. Early last century, an astronomer named Percival Lowell spent 25 years studying the surface of Mars. In 1905, he concluded that water from the ice caps of Mars was flowing down into canals that had been constructed by intelligent beings. He was inspired by Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli, who in 1877 saw thin, dark lines on the Martian surface. Schiaparelli called these lines canali, which translated simply means channels, without implying intelligent construction. Lowell had simply misunderstood the description. Yet Lowell's mistake influenced many people, including H.G. Wells, whose writings influenced many others, as we've already seen. Before long, most people thought there actually was life on Mars. For example, in the United States, a public symposium was held in 1928 called "Eminent Astronomers Give Their Reasons for Their Belief That Life Exists on the Great Red Planet," a widely held belief founded on an unproven hypothesis. However, as more powerful telescopes and unmanned craft scoured the surface, it proved to be uninhabited by any alien race. Canyons on Mars suggest that the surface may indeed have been scoured by water at one time. The Valles Marineris is one such canyon, the walls of which seem to have sedimentary layers of rock deposited by a moving fluid, such as water. The canyon is so large that the Earth's Grand Canyon could fit inside it several times over. Writer Robert S. Boyd commented, "A flood of biblical proportions, enough to fill the Mediterranean Sea, gushed down from the highlands of Mars 1 billion or so years ago. The latest pictures from the Pathfinder confirmed on Monday." Incredibly, many believe that Mars may have been globally covered with water. The observational evidence, including heavily layered canyons and channels, suggests it to be the case. Adding support to this claim, NASA scientists also indicated that some rocks gave the appearance of having been saturated with water at some past stage. Curiously, though, these same scientists reject the possibility of a global flood on the Earth, where sedimentary layers cover most of the surface and which is 70% covered with water. The quote above is, of course, a reference to Noah's flood, recorded in the Bible. There are a few who believe that this great flood on Earth was somehow triggered by advanced aliens overseeing mankind's evolution, cleansing the Earth of impure beings. In language reminiscent of the Bible, many of these believers in a past alien flood believe that the Bible foretells a future cleansing by aliens as well. Ufologists and UFO cults often refer to biblical texts as proof that the ancient extraterrestrial astronauts have witnessed or overseen the historical events recorded in them. God drives a flying saucer. Why do our alien visitors seem to be obsessed with the Bible more than any other religious book? Religious beliefs aside, the Bible is regarded by many scholars as the most accurate ancient book in the world, so it would make sense for UFOs to be in it if they are real. Many writers have taken up the cause of uncovering UFOs in the Bible. A practicing Catholic teacher and scientist by the name of R.L. Dione suggested that UFOs are God's messengers, angels, and are the ones responsible for prophecies, the content of the Bible, and the miracles recorded in it. This is a popular view held by many prominent movers and shakers in the UFO movement. Even Jesus supposedly had energy channeled to him by ET craft that enabled him to perform his miracles. Dione's book, God Drives a Flying Saucer, claimed to prove that God was not supernatural, but a super-technological being who created man in his own image. He wrote, flying saucers are not only real, but closely associated with the Christian religion, and that God, while humanoid, is nevertheless immortal through technology. All of these conclusions will be documented, explained, and proved in the pages that follow. Traditional Christianity still flourishes, so it's fair to say that Dionys' proof was not as earth-shattering as he claimed. His scientific conclusions were based on interpretations. He operated in the realm of historical science. UFO researchers Clifford Wilson and John Weldon stated that Dionys' views were based on his presuppositions, his belief that science and technology can explain everything. Diony also claimed that heaven was merely a super-technological society. But where is this heaven? Where did God, this super ET, come from? How did he come into being? Because many discount a supernatural explanation for an aspect of reality, they hold out hope that perhaps ancient and advanced extraterrestrials could hold the key to our past, present, and future. Writing in Science, author James Mullaney muses, "Can it be that an eventual understanding of the UFO mystery will bring us into closer touch with reality and the universe itself?" The Red Planet, the best hope for ET life. Now we shall look at the evidence for life in our own solar system, a bit closer to home. In the early days of the UFO explosion, 1950s to 1970s, speculation was rife that aliens were visiting us from planets within our own solar system. For example, famous contactees such as George Adamski, Frank Strangers, and Howard Mengler stated that ETs lived on planets such as Venus and Jupiter. Police patrolman and alleged abductee Herbert Schirmer claimed that his visitors, although from another galaxy, had bases on most of the local planets. But Mars has always held a special fascination, and with continued interest in water on the surface, Mars has become a hot prospect for extraterrestrial life once again. Recent reports suggest that huge volumes of water exist just below the Martian surface. NASA's Odyssey instruments had been trained on the Martian surface for nearly a year before Bill Friedman, one of the project's scientists, declared, "In fact, there's enough water to cover the entire planet to a depth of at least 5 inches, or 12 centimeters, and we've only analyzed the top few feet of soil." Many others believe that further discoveries will reveal even greater quantities of water, a cause for celebration because supposedly, where there is water, there will be life. One of Australia's most prominent scientists, Professor Paul Davies, exclaimed, "I believe not only that Mars has harboured life, but it may actually be the cradle of life. We don't know where life began, but a kilometre or two below the surface of Mars seems a good place." Water would explain many of the seemingly water-made geological formations seen on the surface. A Martian exploration craft called Beagle 2, named after the ship that took naturalist Charles Darwin around the world, and 2 NASA vehicles, Spirit and Opportunity, were sent to Mars to examine the soil, looking for water and also any signs of life, past or present. Sadly, and after much hype, the European Space Agency's Beagle 2 went AWOL on Mars and remains lost in space. However, after several weeks of transmissions from their Martian rovers on March 2, 2004, NASA scientists announced that at least one part of Mars appeared to have a persistently wet environment that may have been hospitable to life. But any basic understanding of chemistry will tell you that life does not spontaneously arrive just because of the presence of water. There is more to the Mars life hypothesis than a simple obsession with water. Billion-dollar budgets in the name of science have a religious significance. They offer the answer to the question of origins, and thus something about the meaning and purpose of life. A real visitor from outer space? Belief that life existed, or still exists, on Mars was seemingly vindicated some years before the most recent landings, courtesy of NASA's Martian rock, alluded to in Chapter 1. To date, it is the greatest single piece of evidence for life on Mars. In August of 1996, headlines screamed the biggest news story of the year, Life on Mars. A 4.2-pound, 1.9-kilogram lump of basalt rock that was originally discovered in Antarctica in 1984 was reported to have arrived on the Earth between 11,000 and 13,000 years ago. At the time, many scientists maintained that it contained fossilized microbial life, bacteria from Mars. Technically known as ALH 84001, Allen Hills 84001, this potato-sized rock purportedly made its way to the Earth after being ejected from the Martian surface as a result of an asteroid or comet impact, or possibly even a volcanic eruption. In considering these spectacular claims, one should realistically consider the incredible odds of there being an impact in just the right location that was capable of generating sufficient force to escape the Martian gravity. Volcanoes, for example, simply do not eject objects at this speed. Although Mars has less gravity than Earth, this would require an escape velocity of 18,360 kilometers per hour, 5.1 kilometers per second, or 5 times the speed of a rifle bullet. Scientists then postulate an even more unlikely scenario in which ALH 84001 supposedly took up orbit around the Sun for an indeterminate period until it eventually encountered the Earth. One of the strongest reasons given for the rock's origin on Mars is the composition of gases trapped inside its pores. It is supposed to resemble the chemical composition of samples taken from the Mars Viking lander. However, its mineral composition differs from 11 other meteorites that are supposed to be Martian. Physical chemist Dr. Jonathan Sarfati has commented on another popular piece of evidence. The rock contains a mineral called magnetite, also called lodestone, which was used in the first compasses, as well as another mineral similar to fool's gold. These minerals can be formed by living organisms or by processes having nothing to do with life. It is the occurrence of these minerals together which suggests, to some, that they were formed by living cells, but the researchers haven't ruled out all possible non-living processes. The rock also contains molecules known as PAHs, or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are known to be common in many asteroids, adding weight to the theory that the rock came from space. However, they are also found in common soot or diesel exhaust, and these fossil fuels have an earth-bound biological origin. The rock also has microscopic fossilized worm-like whiskers that are supposed to have been once living organisms. Sarfati comments again, "A huge problem with the alleged fossil bacteria is their tiny size, many times smaller than all known free-living bacteria. Most people don't know that another team which analyzed the same rock found that it lacked a key sign of biological activity. The leader, Jim Papiki, director of the Institute of Meteoritics at the University of New Mexico, said, "When we looked at the ratio of two types of sulfur, there was no evidence that it was in a ratio for life forms. In fact, he said that the ratio pointed in the opposite direction." These whiskers are composed of carbonate materials similar to limestone or marble. Back in 1996, Sarfati suggested that the globules could have been formed by processes completely unconnected with life, and that they showed evidence of rapid heating. Then, in 2002, a rock in the Auckland Domain Museum was discovered to contain life crystals similar to ALH 84001. The only problem for NASA and its pro-Martian life advocates was that this new rock was known to have come from a volcanic eruption in New Zealand in the mid-19th century. The conclusion from this newly discovered rock was that it had been ejected in a hot state and rapidly cooled in icy conditions. This process produced fossil whiskers that look identical to those in the Martian meteorite. Perhaps Sarfati was right all along. The evidences for the Martian rock are anything but conclusive, yet they have apparently added up to be the most convincing evidence for extraterrestrial life ever seen. But even Professor Colin Pillinger, lead scientist on Beagle 2, admitted, "This doesn't actually prove that the evidence in the meteorite is for life on Mars. We cannot say absolutely hand on heart that this is something which happened on Mars until we find organic matter in a genuine Martian sample. We have to go to Mars, and if there is doubt, we will have to bring samples back. If there is still doubt, we will have to send a person there to carry out the experiments in situ." One may well ask how this really came to be such an earth-shattering discovery. Sarfati again comments on the whole affair. "It was certainly a coincidence that the first Life from Mars fanfare in 1996 came just as the US Congress was proposing to cut NASA's funding, although they had collected ALH 84001 back in 1984. The noted astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle argued that it was perhaps a publicity stunt to gain more government money. Considering NASA is absolutely avid to get funding from Congress, one has to be a bit suspicious. It is certainly a coincidence now that the announcement comes just before the new US president is about to announce his budget. To be fair to the researchers in both cases, they presented actual scientific data, although the interpretation of the data is dubious. The life on Mars juggernaut showed no signs of slowing down. Speculation was rife everywhere. Even Dan Golden, chief administrator of NASA, was forced to concede, "I want everyone to understand that we are not talking about little green men here. Exciting, even compelling, but not conclusive." Nonetheless, in the minds of the masses, this was the first step, the first proof that there was life on other planets. Although the media would have us believe that the issue is beyond doubt, it is clear that this proof of Martian ET life, supposedly 3.6 billion years old, is in fact highly controversial among the scientific community. The excitement about the rock and the rovers has no doubt expedited NASA's future manned expeditions to Mars. The face on Mars. In July 1976, NASA's Viking 1 was photographing the Martian surface for suitable locations for planned future landings. When the photos were released to the public, one in particular captured the attention of the world's media. It resembled a humanoid face, complete with headdress. Speculation grew that this 1.2 mile wide by 1.6 mile long structure, 1.9 by 2.6 kilometers, could be an ancient monument, perhaps a testimony to a past civilization. In the same region on Mars, known as Cydonia, there also appeared to be objects that resembled the ruins of other man-made structures, such as pyramids. Could these actually be the calling cards of extraterrestrial visitors to our solar system? Did an ancient civilization once inhabit the planet? Before these questions were even answered, scientists and ufologists alike were speculating on what may have wiped out the population. The person most responsible for promoting the face on Mars theory was speaker and writer Richard C. Hoagland. In his popular 1987 book, The Monuments of Mars, A City on the Edge of Forever, he captivated public attention with the idea that these Martian artifacts were evidences of a fortress, an artificial cliff, a five-sided pyramid, and a collection of other structures dubbed the City Square. Hoagland himself was also promoted as somewhat of a science expert and a consultant in the fields of astronomy, planetarium curating, and space program education. Apparently, at the age of 19, he became the curator of the Museum of Science in Springfield, Massachusetts. He also appeared on many television specials as the resident science specialist, including NBC's special on the Surveyor 1 moon landing. In 1968, he was asked to become a consultant to CBS News and served as a science advisor to Walter Cronkite. However, Gary Posner, contributor to the Encyclopedia of Extraterrestrial Encounters, reports that NASA had little or no interest in Hoagland's speculations and did not intend to explore the region of Cydonia any further. The Encyclopedia report also describes Hoagland as self-educated and indicated that in NASA's view he lacked any credibility at all. Then, in 1998, the Mars Global Surveyor specifically photographed more images of the face at a much greater resolution than before. To silence criticism, NASA revealed the face to be nothing more than a natural feature. When the sun shines at a relatively low angle, shadows accentuate certain features, making the landscape face-like. Posner comments, "With the benefit of 2020 hindsight, has Hoagland now abandoned his city? Oddly, a visit to his website, enterprisemission.com, reveals just the opposite." Once more, the media were willing partners in talking up the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and the public was led astray yet again. Even today, theories about the Mars face are as popular as ever with many famous ufologists, despite the lack of credible evidence. Our local patch, the solar system. Reports of UFO sightings early in the 20th century gave way to alleged contacts and then abductions and messages from space. As we mentioned earlier, many of the early space brothers claimed, and some still do, to be from the planets in our solar system, such as Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Jupiter and its moons, and even Pluto. But is this possible? There are 9 planets in our solar system, all revolving around the Sun. However, Viking 1 and 2 and subsequent probes to Mars have shown no evidence of alien races or any signs of life. The two unmanned Voyager craft, despite carrying messages into space, have never had a close encounter, although they have taken thousands of pictures of Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. Other probes have visited the other planets, and they have revealed nothing but harsh, unlivable conditions in our neighborhood. The closest planet to the Sun is Mercury. It is also the second smallest planet, about half the size of Earth, after Pluto, which is the smallest and furthermost planet from the Sun. A Mercurian year is only 88 days, the time it takes to orbit the Sun. Its orbit is highly elliptical, which causes radical shifts in temperature on its surface. Facing the Sun, its temperature can be as high as 700 degrees Fahrenheit, 371 degrees Celsius. On the dark side of the planet, it can plummet to as low as minus 300 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 149 degrees Celsius. Venus is no more hospitable. An early contactee, a preacher-cum-author named Frank Strangers, claimed a meeting in 1959, in the Pentagon no less, with a Venusian who went by the name of Val Thor. He apparently claimed that his mission was to help mankind return to the Lord, Jesus of the Bible. Strangers made this claim before research found the planet to have surface temperatures of 900 degrees Fahrenheit, or 480 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. When confronted with the evidence of inhospitable conditions on Venus, Strangers said it wasn't a problem because they were living below the surface anyway. But any inhabitant would be choked by the carbon dioxide atmosphere and scalded by noxious clouds of sulfuric acid vapor. Violent storms rage in the atmosphere continually. Mars has no oxygen in the atmosphere, and evening temperatures plummet to minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 38 degrees Celsius. Next is Jupiter, a gas giant with no solid surface, although it might have a solid core. It is the largest planet in our solar system, about the size of 318 Earths. Radiation and magnetic storms bombard the planet. Gravity on Jupiter is about 2.5 times the Earth's. A 176-pound person, 80 kilograms, would weigh 440 pounds, or 200 kilograms, and would have some difficulty moving around. The further out we travel, to Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the more we discover only freezing temperatures and poisonous atmospheres. The physical extremes are beyond our imagining. Everywhere in our solar system we find environments non-conducive to life. Everywhere except the Earth, that is. This brings into even sharper focus the question of where the aliens might be coming from. Recent probes continue to discover even more moons surrounding some of our outer giants like Saturn, but from what has been discovered thus far, our opinions about finding extraterrestrial life on these planets or their moons is unlikely to change. Is it just a coincidence that nowadays most visitors seem to come from further away, elsewhere in the galaxy where we cannot test their claims? The early beliefs about ET life in our neighborhood have proven to be false and inaccurate, so it is prudent to be cautious before accepting even more wild and speculative claims. The search for extrasolar planets. The search for life has now stretched beyond our solar system. Early in the last century, astronomer Edwin Hubble discovered that the small nebulae in the sky were, in fact, neighbouring islands of stars, galaxies outside of our own that contained hundreds of billions of stars. Frank Drake's equation has prompted NASA, SETI, and many others to begin carefully observing individual stars for signs of accompanying planets. This has become known as the search for extrasolar planets. The first discovery of an extrasolar planet orbiting a star similar to our Sun came in 1995, when Michael Mayer and Didier Queloz of Geneva announced that they had found a rapidly orbiting mass close to star 51 Pegasi. The discovery sparked great excitement. Calculations for the size of the planet ranged from half the mass of Jupiter to more than twice its mass. Given the enormous mass of Jupiter to start with, that is a pretty generous range of estimates, and when it comes to habitable planets, size does matter. It will prove difficult to find extrasolar planets capable of sustaining life. Because they are so distant, extrasolar planets are generally too small to be directly observed by present methods. That is, astronomers do not actually see the planets because their reflected light is so weak, being overpowered by their nearby sun. Planets are presumed to exist because their mass affects the stars they orbit. For example, Jupiter causes a slight wobble in our own sun as it pulls the sun off-center. As the star wobbles from the gravitation of a planet, the frequency of the starlight we observe from it can shift up and down, the redshift and blue shift we discussed earlier. This is known as the Doppler effect. A similar thing happens with sound waves. You may have noticed how an approaching police siren seems to change sound when it suddenly passes you and begins moving away. Another planet hunting method is the transit method. This is used to detect a planet passing between its star and our Earth. The orbiting mass causes a minute drop in the intensity of light from the star. We can observe a similar effect when Mercury or Venus passes between our Sun and the Earth. You may have noticed that I am a little cautious in celebrating these supposedly irrefutable evidences of extrasolar planets. For a planet's Sun to be affected, its mass must be of a size similar to Jupiter. Some are even calculated to be 200 times that size. For this reason, there is considerable debate as to whether they are actually planets at all. It is reasoned that, due to their enormous mass, they are more likely to be small suns, such as brown dwarf stars. Even if they are planets, they are likely to be gas giants like our own Jupiter and incapable of supporting life for that reason. Because they are so large, there is too much gravity. Inhabitants would be crushed by the enormous pressure. This is why size matters. There are other problems for the ETH and existence of intelligent alien life on these worlds. Many are too close to the heat of their sun to be able to support life, and many others are presumably known because their highly elliptical orbits affect their star in a detectable manner. These irregular orbits would lead to huge variations in temperature, similar to the effect on Mercury we talked about earlier. Until recently, the nearest presumed extrasolar planet was thought to be about 15 light-years away, about 26,000 times the distance between our Sun and Pluto, in the direction of the constellation Aquarius. Its star is Gliese 876, a dim red dwarf, much larger than the Earth, with only about 1/3 the mass of our Sun and about 1/80th the Sun's brightness. The planet is believed to be about twice the mass of Jupiter and probably a gas giant also. In 2006, observations from the Hubble telescope led astronomers to believe that an even closer planet existed. It is called Epsilon Eridani and is believed to be only 10.5 light-years from Earth. However, its mass is 1.5 times the mass of Jupiter. These alleged planets would be incapable of supporting any life as we know it. Some may argue that these extrasolar objects may indeed support life, but to quote a line from Star Trek's Dr. McCoy, not life as we know it. This is not a strong argument for the proponents of the ETH because it would be reasonable to assume that supposed visitors to our own planet need to be capable of surviving in Earth's environment. So they would need to be visitors from planets with Earth-like conditions, but no such planets have been observed anywhere. Thus, it would be necessary for the aliens to travel in spacecraft built to replicate their home planet's conditions and insulate them from the effects of Earth's environment. Presumably, such a major undertaking to visit Earth would necessitate an extended stay, many years at least, so this would suggest even more amazing technologies to sustain these conditions for so long. There is, of course, no good reason why extrasolar planets should not exist, and some may well be discovered to be rocky planets like those in our own solar system. However, the likely distances of these objects from the Earth make the ETH an unlikely proposition, even if they were inhabited, due to the problems in travelling such immense distances. To date, no habitable planets within or outside of our solar system have been observed. Unfortunately for the advocates of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, our search for life on other planets is revealing that the Earth itself appears to be a unique place indeed. Did ancient man know the truth? Ufologists often turn to the Bible because it demonstrates insightful knowledge about our universe. This knowledge seems impossible if the Bible was written by ancient men who lacked the skills of modern science and technology. One possible explanation is that a being or beings with superior knowledge imparted information to mankind in the distant past. One amazing instance of modern science in the Bible is a passage written by a man called Job. Talking about God, whom he believed was his creator, Job writes, "He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing." Job 26 verse 7, New King James Version. Job obviously would have known that you cannot hang something on nothing. Yet this verse, written around 2000 BC, correctly describes the earth as being suspended in space, almost 4,000 years before manned spaceflight provided the first eyewitness view. This scientific insight is easy to explain if the passage was inspired by an outside intelligence. Looking at this with an open mind, there are two possible sources of the knowledge. Job may have been communicating with an advanced extraterrestrial that he mistook for God, or, as the straightforward reading of the text suggests, Job was indeed dealing with a supernatural intelligence such as a divine creator. This is not an isolated science passage in the Bible. To explain their existence, some subscribers to the ETH believe that ancient extraterrestrial astronauts visited the Earth many millennia ago, as they are still presumed to be doing today, which gave rise to our beliefs, values, and religions. But as many commentators have noted, it is primarily the Bible and the Christian religion that have received special attention from all quarters. This focus suggests that there may be a kernel of truth in there somewhere, but who was right? The original authors who believed they were hearing from a supernatural intelligence, or the modern reinterpreters of the texts who base their conclusions on modern experiences? This ancient astronaut theme was promoted to its fullest by Erich von Däniken in his best-selling book Chariots of the Gods, 1968. We will review his beliefs later in this book. He even founded an ancient astronaut society which has several thousand adherents to his view of the history of the world. Another passage that indicates outside knowledge was imparted to biblical authors is found in a book ascribed to the prophet Isaiah. This passage describes the handiwork of Isaiah's purported creator. It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. Isaiah 40 verse 22, New King James Version. The word circle has been translated from the original Hebrew word kug, which may be translated sphere. Interestingly, the German word Kugel means ball, sphere, or globe. This reference to a circular or spherical earth is another one of those seemingly inexplicable biblical passages. It is often presumed that ancient man could not have known such things. Also, we alluded to another passage earlier about stretching the heavens, which would account for the redshifting of starlight. The Bible contains 66 books by 44 different authors, separated by great distances and as much as 2,000 years. Yet amazingly, they all write accounts of their interaction with God, similarly acknowledging him to be an almighty creator just as the prophet Isaiah did. The Bible also claims that it is the inspired, Greek God-breathed, word of the Creator himself, 2 Timothy 3:16, and that no words of prophecy came about by human will, but by God as men were moved by his Spirit, 2 Peter 1:20 and 21. History has shown many Bible prophecies to be true, such as Isaiah's prophecy that a Persian king would arise with the name of Cyrus, around 150 years before the event occurred. The Bible has also been confirmed by numerous archaeological discoveries, such as the unearthing of a huge capital of the Hittites. These were an ancient people mentioned only in the Bible, but presumed to be a myth because no physical evidence had been found. As a result of these findings, the Bible has often been called the most accurate history book in the world. Is it any wonder that it has come in for so much attention from all quarters? It is historically accurate, yet contains so many seemingly unscientific supernatural references. To many people, it seems apparent that the authors of the Bible must have had outside help from E.T. But how could any mortal creature, terrestrial or extraterrestrial, predict the future? Ufologists have not adequately explained how ancient astronauts could do this unless they could travel through time in some capacity, as some have suggested. But even if UFOs were interdimensional, it doesn't necessarily follow that they could go backward and forward in time. The absence of time travel visitors, tourists from tomorrow, suggests that time travel is not a reality now or in the future. This truly lies in the realm of science fiction, and the Space Brothers do not claim to be time travelers anyway. The only plausible explanation for the accuracy of the Bible's predictions and insights is that they were foretold by someone with the capability of seeing outside our time and space. This is consistent with the notion of a greater intelligence who is located outside of our realm, but who also possesses intimate knowledge of the construction of the universe, a supernatural being. Intelligent design in the universe? Biblical insights show that the authors knew more about their universe than they should have. If ETs have been overseeing mankind's development, then the ETs must have come from somewhere. Either they are the product of evolution, or they were created by other aliens, or by a supernatural creator. Evolution of ETs on habitable planets requires that order come from disorder by itself. But that is not known to happen in the real world. Our universe shows incredible evidence of design. The planets move with absolute precision, so much so that space scientists can plan with amazing accuracy a spacecraft's rendezvous with a planet years in advance. Although known by ancient civilizations, this clockwork accuracy has recently been confirmed among the stars and galaxies. All the planets in our system orbit the Sun in the same direction. Their speed is such that they are held in their orbits by the force of gravity. Without orbital motion, they would be pulled in toward the Sun. Too fast, and the planets move further away. Too slow, and they are pulled in closer. The stability and shape of their orbits also means that they do not get so close as to exert overt gravitational influences on one another. It's believed that a huge dust cloud, around 9.4 billion miles, 15 billion kilometers in diameter, coalesced into our solar system by itself, forming moons and planets with precise orbits and speeds. It requires great faith to believe that such perfection arises out of a cosmic accident like the Big Bang. The existence of such precision, order, and design suggests the miraculous work of a supremely wise and intelligent being who created this order and revealed some of the details to ancient people. Is that an unreasonable hypothesis? Many religious UFO buffs believe that the universe was designed by a creator, but they reinterpret the Bible as a revelation about technological superbeings, e.g. angels and Jesus, on a mission for the creator. In most cases, however, this creator of aliens used evolution as his creative process, and his messengers are trying to help mankind's evolution. In contrast, the traditional biblical view holds that the Creator God made the universe and everything in it supernaturally and near instantaneously. As we've mentioned, there are thousands of eminently qualified scientists who believe this also. Some are the world's best in their fields of expertise. One such scientist is Dr. Stuart Burgess, a design engineer at Bristol University. He's won several industry awards, including awards for his work on spacecraft design for the European Space Agency. He's well qualified to comment on design. He believes that there must be a supernatural explanation to the universe. He says, there is a popular misconception that science has shown that miracles do not happen and cannot happen. This is why modern scientists argue that the biblical creation account is not a valid theory of origins. However, science has not proved that miracles do not happen. Science simply shows how things work when miracles are not in operation. One of the useful aspects of scientific understanding is that it actually helps to identify when a miracle has taken place. Burgess adds, the origin of the universe is a prime example of where natural processes cannot possibly account for what has happened. This is because the creation of the universe involved physical matter appearing from nothing. Therefore, any theory of origins must take into account that the ultimate origin of the universe involved a miraculous act. The Bible clearly teaches that the creation of the initial space, time, and matter was a miracle. The consistency between the Bible and scientific principles is also demonstrated by the fact that many scientists, past and present, have had no difficulty in accepting the supernatural creation account. Burgess, who admits to being a Christian, seeks a rational connection between the design and purpose he observes in the universe and his personal belief in a creator God. Can he prove such an idea? No. Nonetheless, is his idea any more fantastic than the belief that non-demonstrable aliens traveling in physics-defying spacecraft are overcoming mathematically impossible distances to visit our planet, even though our planet would have been impossible to observe from their distant home in the first place? Anyone who tries to combine this fantastic claim with the incalculable odds that a finely tuned universe came into existence by itself must also be a strongly religious person like Dr. Burgess. Each new discovery has shown that the universe is a much weirder place than most people imagined or predicted. In one sense, it's almost too incomprehensible to imagine, yet it does exist. It is a reality that we are a part of. Finely tuned for life, the anthropic principle. Copernicus taught us that the sun did not revolve around the earth, a mistaken medieval view known as geocentrism. Interestingly, this view did not come from the Bible, as some think, but from Greek and Egyptian sources. The neo, or modern Copernican view also teaches that there is no special place anywhere in the universe. However, observation of our position in the universe would indicate that we are, indeed, in a special place. Our galaxy is at least somewhere near the center of the universe. Astrophysicist Dr. Russell Humphreys has written extensively on this. A major review of his work concludes, "The odds for the Earth having such a unique position in the cosmos by accident are less than 1 in a trillion." The problem for Big Bang theorists is that they suppose the cosmos was not created but happened by accident, by chance, natural processes. Such naturalistic processes could not have put us at a unique center, so atheistic cosmologists have sought other explanations without notable success so far. Over the last few decades, astronomers have discovered that the red shifts of the galaxies are not evenly distributed, but quantized, i.e., they tend to fall into distinct groups. This means that the distances to the galaxies also fall into groups, with each group of galaxies forming a conceptual spherical shell, like the layers of an onion. The shells turn out to be about 1 million light-years apart. It's remarkable that the shells are all concentric and all centered on our home galaxy, the Milky Way. If they weren't, we wouldn't see groups of redshifts. Russell Humphreys shows that groups would only be distinct from each other if our viewing location were less than 1 million light-years, a trivial distance on the scale of the universe, from the center. A well-known concept in astronomy, first coined in 1974, is the anthropic principle. This is the idea that the entire universe is finely tuned for life. Human life, in fact. The word anthropic comes from the Greek word anthropos, for human being. One website explains it thus. The fact that the universe is just right for life is well known to physical scientists. In particular, the physical laws and constants appear to be exquisitely and uniquely fine-tuned to permit not only stars, planets, and galaxies to exist, but ourselves too. It's been called the universe's Goldilocks factor because it is all astonishingly just right. Moreover, if the universe were not so finely tuned and had even marginally different properties, it would be so different that life as we know it would not exist, and therefore we would not be around to ask the question of why the universe is special in the first place. Astronomer Donald DeYoung also comments, "For any principle of science to be acceptable," he says, "there must be experimental results with general validity. The anthropic principle, which states that the universe is especially suited for the well-being of mankind, is one such assumption. As just one of hundreds of examples, consider the tides that the moon causes on Earth. If the moon was closer to the Earth, tides would be greatly increased. Ocean waves could sweep across the continents. The seas themselves might heat to the boiling point from the resulting friction. On the other hand, a more distant moon would reduce the tides. Marine life would be endangered by the resulting preponderance of stagnant water. Mankind would also be in trouble because the oxygen in the air we breathe is replenished by marine plants. We can conclude that the moon is in the correct position for man's well-being. Even such details as the mass of protons and the strength of gravity have values that give stability to the universe and thus reinforce the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle is a powerful argument that the universe was designed." There are hundreds of examples where this is shown to be true, and without going into extensive detail, here are just a few that lend themselves to the idea that the universe is especially designed for life on Earth. Stars and their distance from the Earth. Our neighbouring stars in our Milky Way galaxy are nicely spaced apart so that they produce just enough light to be seen, but are not so close that they overwhelm us with dangerous radiation or gravitational forces. On the other hand, if they were further away, the night sky would be considerably darker and the stars would not be so useful as navigational aids and markers for the seasons, which mankind has used for many centuries. The solar system's position in the galaxy. The solar system is located about 2/3 of the way from the centre of the Milky Way. If it were closer to the centre, where there is a concentration of other stars known as the galactic bulge, we would be overpowered by their brightness and nothing else in the universe would be observable. If we were too close to the outer edge of the galaxy, the night sky would be too dark. Perfect daylight. Our Sun does not oscillate significantly in size the way many other stars appear to do. This would make conditions unlivable on the Earth. The Sun provides just the right amount of brightness to the Earth, and it is the perfect colour, its wavelengths, for the job. It has a yellow-white colour, unlike many other stars of differing colours. The peak intensity of its light is in the infrared spectrum, which provides warmth to all inhabitants of Earth. The Earth spins at the correct speed. The spin of the Earth is ideal for producing day and night. Longer days would cause a greater warming up effect and, conversely, longer nights more cold. A faster rate of spin would produce constant violent weather conditions. The right tilt. The axis of the Earth is tilted at an angle of 23.5 degrees. This tilt allows the northern hemisphere to receive more sun from April to September and the southern hemisphere from October to March, thus spreading the sun's warmth over a greater part of the globe than if there were no tilt. This seasonal change is absolutely vital for triggering the blossoming of plants and fruits and to the courtship of some creatures. If the tilt were any greater, the ice caps would melt in summer and flood the land masses. Any less tilt, and the seasons would be less marked due to the reduced variation in temperatures. Perfect distance from the Sun. If we were 10% closer to the Sun, the Earth would have furnace-like temperatures, and 10% further away would produce icy deserts. Also, the oceans would boil off or freeze solid respectively, so there could be no life as we know it. Correct orbit of the Earth. The orbit of the Earth only varies slightly in its distance from the Sun, causing relatively small variations in temperature. A more elliptical orbit, as some other planets have, would be devastating for life on Earth. The right size. We are aware of the effects of reduced or increased gravity on the other planets in our solar system. There is either too much or too little. The Earth is just the right size for its inhabitants. Because of this, water remains in a liquid state. Lesser gravity and the water would be lost to space due to the greater evaporation of cold water caused by lower atmospheric pressure. The water cycle. Water covers 70% of the Earth via its oceans, rivers, lakes and streams. This arrangement, evaporation from oceans to form clouds that eventually cause rain to fall on the land, is unique within our solar system and provides a convenient supply of fresh water for the Earth's life forms. Right construction. Earth offers a vast supply of resources such as wood, metals, animals, plants, and a host of others that are useful for mankind. In addition, Earth has the right conditions to permit the formation and maintenance of the ozone layer in the atmosphere to protect us. It has a magnetic field which helps deflect harmful radiation from the sun. The magnetic field also aids navigation for man and beast. Our atmosphere is composed of just the right gases, unlike some of the noxious combinations found elsewhere in our solar system. Who knows? More and more discoveries suggest design, intelligence, and purpose in this amazing universe. As we discover more of these truths, though, we have a paradox because another mystery only increases, that is, the UFO phenomenon. Why is it that when the search of space is decreasing the likelihood of extraterrestrial visitors, the circumstantial evidence for UFO sightings and alien abductions is increasing? Could Jacques Vallée be right? Are these creatures from another reality? In another context, astronomer and author Don DeYoung says, "It has even been proposed by those seeking to escape the implications of a universe designed for human beings that there really is an infinite number of universes, each with a completely different set of physical properties. According to such thinking, our particular universe just happens to have conditions suitable for human life, and that is why we are here to enjoy it. Of course, there is no way to detect any other universes or comprehend their underlying principles." DeYoung is right. There is no way to scientifically test such things, including Mack and Vallée's other realities. So, if the phenomenon keeps occurring, then perhaps there is some supernatural element beyond the reality that we normally experience. But if we can't test it and we ourselves can't know, Who would know? The Bible seems to have insight in this regard and is also the focus of much UFO speculation. This is not just my opinion. If you read any UFO literature, the issue of how ancient man could have known so much about the universe will very likely appear on the table for discussion. Besides being a religious book, it is the only such ancient book that has stood up to scientific scrutiny, once you understand the limits of science in really testing the past. The Bible's knowledge of the universe and prediction of future events suggests an interaction with intelligence or forces outside of, but interacting with, our reality. If indeed there were a creator or creators, surely they would not have left us to our own devices. Wouldn't they, or he, or it, want to be known by their created beings? If they do, then almost as surely they would have given us some indication of other dimensions or other realities if such things exist. To know how and why any extraterrestrial life may have arisen, and even the reason why we exist, we eventually have to go back to the beginning. All parties, regardless of their philosophical assumptions, realize that understanding what happened in the past is the key to the present and perhaps the future. The only physical evidence we have is in the present. In this chapter, we've looked at the present-day evidence for the origin of the galaxies, stars, and life on other planets. In the next chapter, we'll look at evidence for the origin of life on Earth. If we can find the Creator, whether it is evolution or a group of supernatural aliens or a supernatural God, we should be better placed to discover the truth about the origin of all life, as well as about any other realities or dimensions. So, how did life on Earth come about?